Welcome to the Possibility Hub video series. I'm Carol Talbot, the creator and founder of the Possibility Hub, and in this episode, John Paul Fischbach shares the purpose and powerful experience of the Sweatlodge. Hello again, John Paul. Welcome back to the Possibility Hub. And if you want to get hot, then this is the episode to listen into, because we're talking about sweat lodges, the purpose behind sweat lodges and how you build a sweat lodge. And I know you've got an image of a partially built sweat lodge behind you. So tell us more.
So the sweat lodge was one of those things that was given to us by White Buffalo Calf Woman. So when we talked about the sacred pipe, we talked that she came to the people 4 times and she gave the people 4 ceremonies. So the sweat lodge was one of the 4 ceremonies. And the understanding of the sweat lodge, so it's a sweat lodge, it's in Lakota terms, they call it an inipi ceremony. And Temescal would be a term that you might know. So it's the same idea that there's a purification ritual that's required, that after we leave the womb, we ain't got no way to purify anymore. So if you think about when you're in the womb, all that stuff gets cleansed by your mother. She takes care of all that for you. So the idea of the sweat lodge is a way for us as after the womb to crawl into a womb and to be sweat and to be purified and cleansed of things. So that's why it's this kind of belly shape. So you're looking at the sweat lodge from the west. So we're looking through the west. And if you look closely, you can see that there's a pit in the middle. That's where the hot stones are. Then if you can see through that, you see kind of an arched doorway. And that's the entrance to the sweat lodge facing the east, but it could face the west. It depends on your tradition. And then if you look a little further down the road, you'll see that there's a fire pit. So there's an alignment with the east. And the reason for that is that when you come out of the lodge, you come out as a newborn person, come out to the rising sun, come out to the new vision, come out to the dawn. So you emerge into the east is the reason that it all is aligned to the east. And you've got a fire representing the sun. There's a little altar, usually that's just by the door where you leave the sacred pipe that gets filled and is smoked after the ceremony is over. But it's a way for everyone to crawl into that lodge. And this is a better picture because it shows you the structure. So the structure is built out of saplings. And again, it depends on where you are in the world. Traditionally in North America and Canada, we built them out of willow. So if you know that willow bark is the main ingredient in aspirin, so to remove the headache, to remove the pain, to quiet that so you can pray. So the willow acts as a medicine. So these willow saplings are bent over, and that's what forms the structure. And then covering that would be blankets, tarps, anything that's not exactly plastic. You don't want to wrap it in plastic because that's just painful. So you want something that breathes a little bit. And it's pitch dark in there. And a lot of people get confused. They think that that middle there's a fire in there, but no, there's not. That's just a pit where the stones that have been heated for hours and hours and hours out in the fire on the outside are brought to the lodge by one of the fire keepers. And then the sweat lodge host, the shaman, will grab those stones and place them in the pit in the middle. They're glowing and red hot and they get blessed. And we refer to those stones as the grandfathers. So we welcome the grandfather rocks in to the sweat lodge, and then water is poured on them, and you go through cycles of prayer. So there's 4 rounds to a sweat, typically.
And when you mean rounds, is that 4 opportunities for whether it's new stones coming in or if people choose to leave?
Yes. So yes, there's 4 rounds of prayer. So 4 different times that you pray. So the door gets opened, new stones come in, and it's up to the sweat lodge keeper how many stones come in each time. It depends on how the people are doing. It depends on how hot it is. As a good sweat lodge leader, you're managing the physical environment as well as the spiritual environment. And it's not about endurance. It's about prayer, and it's about cleansing. So you want to sweat, you want to release the toxins, you want to clear yourself as best you can. So that's why, and it needs to be a little bit uncomfortable because you want to push through something. So it's this idea that there's a little bit of suffering and sweating, but you want to be able to keep sweating. If it gets so uncomfortable that you can't pray and you can't do anything because you're in such discomfort, then that's not good. So it's a delicate process to lead a sweat lodge, because you've got to continually keep monitoring that. And you also have to monitor the wellness and the spiritual connection of everyone in the lodge. And I've had several hysterical experiences where things spin out of control.
So are people, when you say prayer, are they, I know when I've been in sweat lodges, there's singing. So are you using singing and chanting as a prayer, or that everybody is involved in, or is the leader and the holder of the sweat lodge mainly doing that?
No, in the way, and again, it depends. When you're, most people that I know that are pipe carriers are also sweat lodge leaders. I don't know that it's necessarily true the other way, but quite often they go together. So there's a deep understanding of prayer. And if you're leading prayer for a community, it's important for all of those members to get a chance to pray. So let's say, for example, the theme of this sweat lodge might be all of the men in your ancestral line. So you're going to be praying for your fathers, your grandfathers, your uncles, your brothers. So it's prayers for the men. So that might be that you get a chance to say, and I pray for the release of, let's say you know that your father really suffered from something and you would like to help to pray for the release of that pain. So you might, when it's your turn to pray, you might offer those prayers. And you say, I pray and I sweat and I suffer for my father, and I pray that he gets through or he's relieved of. So that can be very, very personal. And the more the people in the community, in the lodge, know each other, the more honest and intimate those prayers become. And it's often just extraordinarily beautiful. There was a lodge that I did recently. It was a men's lodge, meaning there was only men in the lodge. And they had known each other because they were part of an AA group. And so they knew each other, warts and all, absolutely knew each other. And one of the guys prayed for his best friend. Well, what we didn't know is that his best friend had died. And he was praying for that friend. And he said in the lodge, what happened to him was he had this incredible feeling of release. And he saw his friend, and his friend looked at him in the lodge and said, now that you're with all these beautiful brothers, I can go. You don't need me anymore. So it was this beautiful separation that came from the prayers of release and surrender.
And
so
of course,
amazing thing.
when one person shares, it always, when you're a group and a cohesive group, when one person shares, you know, we think it's just for that person, but it always touches somebody else's heart. And it's incredible how synchronicity works and the right people are in the right lodge at the right time together. So, you know, I find when, you know, somebody shares an issue in a group, somebody else will say, that's exactly what I'm feeling, you know, and, you know, there's an echo that goes round. So, you know, in healing, in release, it's never about one person. You know, everybody around you in your field benefits. And I always say to people, you know, the effort that you put in expanding your consciousness, your evolution, is not just to benefit yourself, it benefits all of humanity. And then you look at, you know, even something simple like setting your intention or a goal. We think we do that for ourselves, but say it's something simple like you want a new job or a new opportunity. If you get that new job or that new opportunity, it means somebody left or the company expanded, or, you know, somebody got a better role. And then if they got a better role, then it means somebody, and you follow the line and you see that everyone is connected. And we so forget that when we live in this illusion of separation. So
Yep.
That's another area where the sweat lodge, you know, you're in close proximity and in that cocoon, that womb that you say, and in darkness. And sometimes also in darkness, it gives you permission to express feelings and emotions that maybe you wouldn't express in daylight.
Yep. Yes. If you're not aware of everyone looking at you because they can't, it's pitch black, you're free to express. You don't have any judge. You know, Grey Wolf always used to say, it's the eyes that judge.
Yes.
So if you don't have any judging eyes staring at you, then you're more free to let go and release and share things.
Okay, now you said there's traditionally 4 rounds. So how long does a round last usually? And then what happens between each round? Do people get the option to go out? And from my understanding with most of the sweat lodges and Temescals that I've been in, if you leave, you cannot come back in.
Again, that's up to the sweat lodge leader. So if the group is incredibly coherent, you want to keep that energy. So you would say something like, you know, if you leave, then you've left that energy. You've taken your energy away. I tend to be a little more relaxed in my sweat lodges. If someone needs to go out to, you know, we just might have a longer pause. So I guess rounds, how long do they last? 20-ish minutes, 30 minutes, something like that per round. It depends again, because I feel it's important for everyone to pray. And some people have a lot that they need to get off their chest, and their prayers go for a long time. And some people are quite shy and they hardly say anything. So it's the length of time it takes to go around. And if it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter, then you speed up the round. If it's, you know, if everyone's just chilling, then you might lengthen the round to build up a bit of heat. So it varies. And then once the round is finished, so I finish a round with a song. So we do the prayers, and then we have some kind of a thank you song and some kind of blessing. If it's been particularly hot, then I spray water on everybody. And then we scratch the door, and our firekeeper opens the door, because you're sealed in. I mean, they've packed the blankets down and you're sealed back in. So it's up to them to open the door, and then that lets air in. Quite often I just I have the people that are sitting in the west pull that up a bit, and you get a nice cross breeze. And that's usually enough for everybody. So people don't have to leave. And it's largely that it takes a long time to get everyone out and get everyone back in. And I think it breaks, for me, it breaks the energy so much to have everyone actually get out. But if you have to get out, you have to get out. I mean, really, there's no point. But I'll tend to just hold a pause there and ask that person to come back in. Say, are you feeling okay? Can you come back in? If not, please sit outside the lodge while we continue on. But I'm not the kind of, you know, if you leave, you can't come back. Because again, I don't want people to feel that they're forced there. I want them to be there by choice, and I want to push them a bit and push their level of comfort. But there's no point in breaking anyone.
No, and I know there's certain places to sit, you know, especially in some small, sweat lodges, which are very small. You know, some people choose to sit nearer the entrance, because as soon as that opens, it's like,
Yes,
and
clever.
then sometimes I've been in sweat lodges where there's 2 concentric circles. So there's the outer circle and there's the inner circle. And of course, the inner circle, you're closer to those hot stones, you're going to be hotter. So
Yeah.
I liked the fact that you said you can open up the west just a little. And I know I've sort of snuggled into the back and kind of like just lifted it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, and I tell people, I say, look, you know, if you're really suffering, get as low to the ground as you possibly can. And if you need to, just sneak your hand underneath the flap. I mean, you know, if your whole focus is, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, you're not praying, you're not present.
No, and
So,
I also found that the prayer and the singing is also very cathartic, when you can literally go, you know, or sing at the top of your voice and the song gets faster and faster. Because as you said, the whole idea is to have a release and not just physically sweat, but mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. So it's a very cathartic experience.
well, isn't the feeling incredible when you crawl out at the end? I mean, you feel cleansed better. It's just incredible.
How do you how do you close that ceremony when people come out, you know, and are like, you know, prostrate on the grass?
Yes, you make sure everyone tops up their water. So I always make a round and make sure everyone's got plenty of water. Then I go back in and I thank the grandfathers, and I do a round for the grandfathers. So just me alone in the lodge. And I do a round just for those grandfather rocks to thank them, and thanks for their journey to this earth and to be available to us. So it's a big gratitude round. And usually by that time, then I sing my last song, and then I come out and everyone's pretty back to normal. Then we have a stand around the fire, and then we finish the pipe. So we load the pipe with all the prayers before the lodge. Then I pack it with some sage. So I pack the bowl to keep sage on top of that. And then when it's all done, we pop that, throw that in the fire. And then we finish the sweat lodge with the pipe ceremony. And, if there's water, sometimes you're lucky and you're by a river and people get to jump in the river, or you're by a dam or a lake. And that's just spectacular after it. But it's just, I love that feeling of being completely cleansed inside and out. I think there's nothing better than that.
Yes, it's so joyful. It's so joyful. Is there a specific number of people who are allowed in a sweat lodge?
It's the capacity of the size of the lodge you build. So the one in the picture is about your 12 to 14 person lodge, which there's only room for one row really. So you wouldn't, but it really depends on the size of the sweat lodge. When we sun danced on the Pine Ridge Reservation, we had to build mammoth sweat lodges because all the men and all the women would have to sweat together. So they were ridiculously huge. It was unbelievable how big these were. And I just thought, there is no way these are ever going to get hot enough. But yes, they did. They definitely did.
My memories of sweat lodges is that the building of the sweat lodge and clearing of the ground is also, the ritual as well in terms of the good intention. And I know my first sweat lodge was, I think I mentioned it to you when we weren't recording, and on another session, was in Le Cornu when I was doing my fire walking training. And it was in a very remote area. And myself and one of the other students on the course, our task was to clear the ground and create the pit. And we had a lot of fun doing that as well. And then of course, building the structure, putting the blankets over, it's quite a time to build this structure. And then I also shared with you, this was my first experience of a sweat lodge. We'd also fasted throughout the day. We'd not just fasted, we'd cleansed our system as well with slightly salted water, and drank a lot of salted water. So you were either going to sweat it out, or before the sweat lodge, it was going to come out other ways, this way, or purging the other way. So we'd already purged and cleansed. So it was a whole day preparing for this sweat lodge. And most of the people on the course were either French, German, or Swiss. And together they decided that it was going to be a naked sweat lodge. And me being British was, oh, I don't think so. Because not only that, John Paul, but it was a very, very small sweat lodge for the number of people. You literally moved a hand and you didn't know what you were, if you get my drift. Yeah. So I was the only one there in a bikini and a sarong. And I know now you can do naked, you can do whatever you feel comfortable in. And it can be very cleansing because it is pitch black in there, completely pitch black. But it was my first experience and it was like, whoa. And also, even though between each rounds, there was an opportunity to leave if you chose, if you were in a certain part of the lodge, it was nearly impossible to sort of get out and round. So my thought at that time was, each round, I hope a few people leave and give me a little bit more space.
Yeah.
And then the last time I did a sweat lodge was actually New Year's Day, the beginning of this year. New Year's Day, we'd done a ceremony all night, and then we went in, and it was just so beautiful. Early hours of the morning to go into the sweat lodge, and then when you come out to feel totally cleansed, coming out of a sweat lodge, coming out of a year and into a brand new year. I mean, what a wonderful celebration. It was incredible.
Perfect.
And that sweat lodge was so enjoyable in terms of the joy, because we'd gone through the night together. So it was really, instead of letting go, it was more of a celebration to welcome in the new. So like you say, there's
beautiful.
many reasons to do a sweat lodge. It's cleansing, it's cathartic, it's an opportunity to celebrate.
But how beautiful that the whole group of you all birthed together.
Yes.
That you all cleansed and you all crawled out of that incredible womb all together.
Yeah. It was...
So one of the teachings I got was that White Buffalo Calf Woman gave the sweat lodge to the men. And she said, I give this ceremony to you men because you don't have a way to cleanse. Women have a way to cleanse every month, but you men don't have anything. So you need this ceremony. So it was something given to the men. And there are traditions that still only believe that it's a men's ceremony because women have their own. But, and then there's a lot of traditions where they say, women that are on their moon, women that are menstruating, can't come into a sweat lodge.
Yes, I've heard.
And yeah, and I was of the, New Age contingent in 1987 that said, well, that's ridiculous and there will be no such thing. So I've been asked to lead sweat lodges, and these beautiful lesbian women who were at this gathering came and they gave me the appropriate gift, the tobacco wrapped in red cloth, and asked me to please would I lead a lodge for these lesbian women, transgender, anyone. And I'm like, absolutely, absolutely. And she said, and there's a couple women on their moon. And I said, no problem. What an idiot was I. There is something seriously happening with women on their moon that produces an extreme amount of energy. Good. And one of the jobs of the sweat lodge leader is to keep the energy moving. And if it starts to spin too fast, people can get headaches and all kinds of things can happen. So you're always grounding the energy, returning it to the, making sure that it's kind of like a toroidal field inside the lodge. And your job is to keep it moving, but keep it grounded. Don't let it build up too much. Well, I'm here to tell you there is something very serious about a woman on her moon that is energetic beyond belief. I thought I was going to die. It was all I could do to maintain the energy. When we opened the flap at the second round, I crawled out on my elbows. I made it halfway out the door and collapsed on the ground and thought, what is going on? And that was my teaching about women's power.
Isn't it funny how, the universe always comes back to bite you in the bum if you haven't, so to speak, if you haven't honored, the ritual and what things are really all about. It reminds me when you were saying the other week when we were talking about being a sacred pipe carrier, and you'd asked everybody in the group if they'd had alcohol, and everybody said no, and then somebody took the pipe and it immediately went out, and you thought, something going on there. Yeah. And it was true. He admitted then he had a beer and didn't think it mattered. And it really, these things do matter. And sometimes in people's enthusiasm, they forget to share, really important and pertinent bits of information with you. And so over the years, I've learned to ask more questions, to check information, and being a little bit more thorough. And of course, some of those things do come with experience. And the most important thing with all these ceremonies is to keep it safe and to make sure that, yes, there's a little bit of suffering, and not to the point where, as we know, there have been experiences in sweat lodges where, it is hot. It's like, not just a sauna, it's different than a sauna.
Uncomfortably hot.
Yes. It can be uncomfortably hot. So it is important in all these things to have somebody that knows what they're doing, and a real leader, somebody who can ground the energy, somebody who can keep the energy moving, and also who has an eye on everybody, who can make sure and check in with everybody. Because again, I've seen ceremonies where I've seen people literally, and that I serve Cambo, and you see people where there's one facilitator for 20 people and they're dropping like flies, or somebody faints, and that may be fine for some people. I always like to know in ceremony that, you know, somebody's got your back, that somebody's looking out for you, that, you know, somebody has your best intention. So it's not about your experience if you're holding space. It really is about holding space for everybody to have a great experience and being that facilitator that looks out for everybody, and also having the experience. And I'm sure, I mean, you do this all the time, that, you know, if there's certain things, you can change tack. If something comes up in the group, it's like, well, that's not part of the ceremony. You know, it's like bringing it together in the most beautiful way, such that everybody's experience is enhanced.
Yeah, I was doing a sweat just a couple of months ago, and it was a women's sweat. And, you know, it's pitch dark in there. I can see auras, but they all merge together, and I can't, you know, it's hard to discern. But, you know, at some point, you know, third woman on my left was starting to get headaches. And so I, you know, knew it was the third woman on the left. So I, you know, said, just a second. And I, you know, said, I'm going to reach across to some knees here. And I tapped her and said, bring your head over. And I, you know, gave her a good washing of, you know, cool water on her head. And she said, that's perfect. How did you know? And I said, well, that's my job.
Yes.
I mean, that's your job. Your job is to minister to those people and look after the health of those people and the cleansing of those people. And you take that really seriously. If you've been asked to lead this ceremony, you take it really seriously. You know, when you hear those stories of people that got wounded or what, you think I can't imagine how that happens.
Yes. So I think that, you know, as much as we'd love to encourage all the viewers to experience the beauty, the power, the cleansing of a sweat lodge, please make sure that the space is held and facilitated by somebody who's really, really experienced, because it is a glorious experience. Really, such a cathartic experience when you've completed and you crawl out, and the community that it creates. So is there anything else you'd like to say about the Sweat Lodge that might encourage people that this is a wonderful opportunity for them?
If you find that person that's running sweat lodges that you love and trust, a sweat lodge is a very powerful healing tool, extraordinarily powerful. But a healing sweat is different than a group or a communal sweat lodge. It's a very different experience, but they are incredibly powerful. So if you find someone that is running beautiful lodges and you would like to do a healing sweat, that's typically, in my tradition, that's you plus 2 witnesses and the sweat lodge keeper. So there's 2 people who know you really, really well and have your best interest at heart. And so you bring your 2 witnesses and the sweat lodge leader, and it's just the 4 people in the lodge for the purposes of that healing. And you go through the different levels of where the healing is required. So you do a spiritual round, you do a mental round, you do a physical round, you do an emotional round to release all the layers of that problem. So it's stunningly beautiful, and the reports of success are just off the charts. So it is one of those incredible things that when White Buffalo Calf Woman gave us this ceremony, it has, you know, a couple of different facets. I've also done sweats for marriages. Oh. I've done for the bride and the groom, where they've done a beautiful kind of let's cleanse and let's start this relationship together, letting go of. Also, part of it was letting go of all of their past relationships so that they can join in this union, you know, with innocence. So it was the bride and groom did 2 rounds by themselves, and then they invited others in for the next 2 rounds. So there are different ways that the sweat ceremony can be used, which is just, I mean, it's just extraordinary.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing this extraordinary and very unusual ceremony, but very, very powerful ceremony with us all today. Thank you so much.